So that group of tables will identify every asset that you have within the IT enterprise, and then will relate each asset to other assets available, right? By definition, it says configuration management database is a series of tables containing all assets and business services controlled by company and their configurations, right? Configuration items such as computers and other devices on the network, software, contracts and licenses, and business services are represented. It's very important to understand, and we have been talking about IT assets and asset management cycle, asset management process uh, when we were discussing different other things and topics. So every asset that we introduce within IT enterprise will go through the asset management life cycle. It will take birth, it will, you know, it will go into its infancy, and then it will mature, and then it will have to be retired as well. So an asset has a life cycle that is taken care by asset management life cycle, right? Now, when you have an asset within your system, where do you store those information about those assets, right? So those information go into those the information about the assets go into CMDB application, right? Yeah. Yeah. Let's go into configuration management application. So this is the application we are talking about, configuration application. So the configuration application is basically configuration management database, right? So it's a database of all the assets and the relationships within the assets, etc. And yeah, then that's how you position your IT assets within the system. Now let's look into how your IT information, IT assets will be typically organized, right? So we'll talk about uh, the IT enterprise at a large first, and then we'll try to drill down and see how our assets will be positioned within our IT enterprise. So see, if you are a company and your company is established into all the five continents, and you have, let's say, 30 offices in different countries, right? So so you will have the first thing that you will have is you will have a network, and the network will be a wide area network somehow, right? And that wide area network will be connected to some ISP for internet connection. Within that wide area network, you may have another wide area network depending upon the countries that you are into, or you may have another local area network. You may have storage area network there. You may have a data center where you host all servers, right? When we talk about servers, servers could be physical server, it could be a virtual server, right? On the server, you will have different hardware, right? The server can also be classified according to the hardware that you have. So within the data center, you will have physical server and virtual server, meaning the boxes. Physical servers will be the boxes. Boxes means the CPUs that get installed within the data center. Those are the physical servers or boxes that we are talking about. Virtual servers may lie within these physical servers that you have. Right. Now, let's talk about hardware, and I'll take hardware to this level. Within the hardware field, you will have, see, you can do different kinds of organization of hardware. For example, the hardware could be an IBM hardware, it could be Dell hardware. I mean, let's talk about server first. It could be IBM server, it could be Dell server, it could be some HP server, some EMC server, right? Something else, so on and so forth. See, and within the organization, you will say that why are we remembering the name of the companies within the organization? So these are top few manufacturers of server, and enterprises use these kind of servers within their organization to do different activities, right? So when you manage a data center or something, you manage a data center or you are doing the asset management life cycle, you will have different tags to identify the assets that you have within your configuration manager, right? So people understand servers by IBM server, right? I have seen people talking about, "Oh, that server for our project, which is the IBM server, right? It has to go under maintenance." I have also seen people talking about, about a server, and they talk like, no, 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 we don't need to update that IBM server. We need to update the Dell server, right? The reason I am telling is this: you will have to have the different taglines, different tags within your IT management, asset management life cycle, where it will decide, where it will identify which assets you are talking about, right? We will see how those identifications are done. Now, when you have a hardware, which is specifically a server, you will have to maintain the information about those servers somewhere, right? So somewhere this information about the server will be stored, which will say, okay, this server has this much of CPU, this much of RAM, this much of hard disk space, this much of cache memory, etc. Then you will have other information like what is the location of the server. So you will say this server is located in this city, and within this city you have within this office, because there could be more than one offices within a city. So you will have information like this server is stored in this city within this office, and within this office you have this building where this server is lying. Within this building, what floor this server is lying, and on that floor, right, what is the room number where the server is lying, and within that room number, if you have racks there, right? What is the rack number that is uh, having this server, where the server is physically kept. See the what is the level of detail that we go into when we design our CMDB. So just by looking at the record, you can identify what place within the building, within the office, and within the country, within the city, and within the continent the server is actually lying, right? Then you have other information like, can you hang on a second, please? I just got a call from somebody. Sorry about that. So, so we take note of city, offices, building, floor, rooms, and racks, and then we keep track of who is maintaining the server as well. For example, um, I'll keep note of team as well, and person managing who manages the server. or maybe you will have support team information here, right? Where you will identify which support team, the server support team will manage the server, the hardware, etc. Then you also maintain different information like the support level, right? Support level meaning this server will get support up to L1, L2 or L3 level supports or something like that, right? You will store this information, not necessarily in the same table, but you will have this information maybe in some related table, right? But this is important. That's why I'm saying, right? You will have information about support levels. You will have information about something known as follow the sun, etc. Follow the sun is a standard tool being talked about in IT asset management, processes, and what it means is uh, you must have a support team that works in shifts and makes sure that the server or asset that you are chasing or managing gets support 24 cross 7, right? Meaning, if you have offices within different geographies, like in India, in Canada, in US, in Africa, and you have one support team in India which is supporting for 8 hours, right? While the sun is there in India, the team in India will be supporting that server. When the sun moves to, let's say, Africa, then there will be another team who will support for another 8 hours. And then when sun moves to, let's say, US, then you will have a different support team that will support the server or hardware or asset during their day, right? So you might have a flag within your database or a column within the database, any of the tables there, that will identify if the server has follow the sun feature enabled on it or not. So we have location about the we have information about the location of the server, about the configuration of the server. You may also have information about what are the applications installed on the server, right? This is also very important. Why is it important? Because if you have a server, why are you using that server for, right? There must be some use of that server, right? One straightforward and obvious use that we can see is that we install some of the application, we host those applications on those servers, right? Now, if you have hosted those applications on servers, then you'll have to have a better relationship established between those hardware and the application somewhere. When you have the applications installed on the server, you will also try to maintain relationship whether the application that you have installed on the server is a production one or a non-production one or a high availability, right? Now, when you have the list of applications hosted on the server, you have configured it as production or non-production version, right? Then you will maintain a different listing of all the applications that you have, where you will identify what are the databases to that application, what is the application server. Application server here means something like Tomcat, Apache, Nginx, or IIS, right? Something like this. Which environment your application is hosted into. Then you will have other information like the version of the application hosted, right? You will have its version histories, etc. You will have version history of those applications here, right? Now, you will also have information about what are the other what are the other instances of the application sorry, on other servers, right? So this way you have this much of information, right? Now talking about the hardware, when we were identifying the servers, we also could have identified if the server that we have is, let's take just one example. The server that we have is a Linux server, a Windows server, Solaris one, X, or other, right? So when you identify these servers within the server properties, you also identify the date of commissioning the server, and date of decommissioning. This is the future date, right? We all know that every hardware that we have introduced within our IT enterprise comes with an expiry, right? So organizations think in terms of those things. Whenever you identify a need for a hardware, you introduce that hardware within the system. You create a record of that system, that hardware within your IT enterprise, and then you calculate the date of decommissioning. You would assume that this server that we are going to introduce will be good enough for another 7 years. After 7 years, this hardware will not be usable. So either we will have to rehaul the hardware that we have introduced, or you will have to decommission that hardware and get a new one. Right? So that's a cost incurred. Right? Within this hardware properties, you will also have information of cost centers. Right? You have cost centers and profit centers, right? So you will have information like this server that you are introducing within the asset management process and configuration management database is a part of the cost center or is a part of profit center. You may have this information as well, right? So this information will help you in pulling out different reports. For example, if your manager asks you to pull out a report of all those servers which is part of cost center, not profit center, right? Because on a given year, you might want to cut cost on different hardware or software that you have introduced within the system, and you don't want to overspend on IT infrastructure or hardware or asset for those cost centers which are not. The cost centers are to save money, right? Profit centers are to generate money, right? So obviously, you will not like to invest much on the cost center, but you will like to invest more on profit center because you are generating more revenue. Cost centers are like keeping the business running. What you have been doing in past, you are maintaining that same pace, and you are ensuring that the things that you have done in past, you are still maintaining those things, right? And by doing so, you are saving cost to your organization, right? So you will have information about the cost centers, etc. How do you relate the cost of the total cost of the hardware is a different stuff, right? Where this cost of the hardware will be related to your purchase orders and invoicing. That's a different story. These hardwares will in any way will be related to your finance or procurement applications, right? So that's a different relationship, right? But date of commissioning, date of decommissioning, cost centers, etc., will be the properties of the hardware that you introduce within the system, right? We'll see more properties about these hardwares when we go into this app navigator and configuration. We'll see about that, but these are some of the points that I can remember right now. Now, this was only about the hardware that we introduced and the application that we installed on the server, right? But believe me, there are plenty of other stuffs within the asset management life cycle, within the list of assets that we must know. For example, the network devices, right? Network devices. You would never know what is the number of network devices that is installed within your IT enterprise because there is a huge list of network devices that gets installed. Let's start with Not start with. There are different like gateways, routers, hubs, cables, cables, splitters, different other stuff, right? And we also forgot about when we established servers, we could have server clusters, we could have uh, several other things. So we'll talk about these. So these are the networking devices that you have there, and these networking devices will then be tied to a network. For example, the wide area network, right? So these networking devices that you will identify these gateways by the manufacturer name and the device ID. So you have a device ID, you have a manufacturer name. You can attach this device ID to this wide area network, which in itself has a WAN ID or a network ID. Right? So you now establish a relationship between the wide area network and the gateways that you have. There is a one-to-one relationship that you are establishing. Right? There could be other relationship as well. For example, this wide area network can have multiple gateways, can have multiple routers, can have multiple hubs. Now, this router can be connected to this gateway and using one to one or one to many relationship, right? This gateway or this wide area network can have many to many relationship among all these assets that we identified, right? So, so we talked about data centers, we talked about servers, we talked about networks, we talked about local area network, wide area network, storage area network, data centers, databases, applications, hardware, servers, location of the hardware, right? The support team, follow the sun, all these kind of stuffs and properties we talked about, right? Let's go ahead and jump into the configuration management that we have within ServiceNow, right? So before going there, if you go to this application page and hit Enterprise CMDB, right? This will give you a view of what all is there within your CMDB. You may see that there are different cards available here that contains different information, starting with application server. Right? Now you see, this application server that we have here is not the hardware we are talking about. Hardware is different. Application servers are the programs or software that we install on those hardware in order that our application functions. Right? So this all is containing all of these list of application servers, but to specifically look into, we'll have Tomcat servers, we'll have JBoss server, we'll have BA, WebLogic, IBM Web Server, WebSphere, Java, Domino, and Web Server. Right. So these are the identified application servers. It is not like these are the only application servers within your enterprise. These are the identified application servers. This gives you a view that your application is working on this technology stack for the application server and utilizing the services of these application servers only, right? In future, you may like to identify one more category of application servers where you have, let's talk about an example of IIS server. You can have one IIS server as a web server there, and then you can host your applications on those IIS servers that you installed there, right? But at present, this instance, this ServiceNow instance that I have shows the configuration of assets within my IT enterprise, and my IT enterprise has these number of application servers identified. Now, talking about database instances, we have DB2, we have MySQL, Oracle MySQL, MS SQL, and Sybase identified within my IT enterprise. Like we talked about application servers, you can have another database instances created as well. But as of now, only these five databases are configured within my IT enterprise CMDB, right? Now there is a listing of business services. So business services are services like the essential services that let you run your business as usual. For example, the email service that you have, the chat service that you have within the organization, right? These are the support services that you have within the organization, and you must identify those services within the organization, because if any one of these services goes down, it will hamper the productivity of the project team, of the business unit, or of the office as a whole, and then of the company as well, right? So you will identify all the business services as essential business services within the business services box in specified tables. We will see where we can store those information. Now let's talk about the servers. These are the physical servers or virtual machines, right? And the type of servers identified for my IT enterprise here is the Linux server, the Windows server, the Unix server, SolarX, X, HBooks, and cluster. These are not hardware. These are the group of the hardware, right? So these are the servers that we have identified within our system, right? Talking about network devices, we have networks, which contains of LAN, WAN, storage area networks, SAN, etc. Then you have network gear, you have virtual private network, you have switches, you have routers, all sorts of networking devices, right? And believe me, there are n number of other networking devices that you will be using, which is not listed here, right? But when you build your real-time configuration management database, you will come to see that all those devices will appear and show up there, and then you will have a record of all those devices within your configuration management database. And then at last, you will have the base items, which contains the servers, computers, the storage. Computers are the PCs or desktops or laptops that you use to work on, the workstations, right? Then you talk about storage. If you talk about the storage could be local storage of your PC, where you store information on your hard drive, or it could be a network file share, network directory where you store your information, or it can be an org share or a file share or a directory share. Different kind of storage the storage areas that you identify within your IT enterprise. Storage could be also cloud storage, where you could use AWS Compute Engine or H3 buckets or Dropbox buckets to store the information, or OneDrive itself, right? So these kind of storage will may be available within your IT enterprise. Then you have list of all the printers as well. Let's assume that your organization has 20,000 employees, and to serve those 20,000 employees, you have 500 printers across 50 offices across the globe, right? So, and these are network printers, right? These will be accessed by each single person within the IT enterprise, right? Because network printers can be accessed, so accessed by everybody by sitting anywhere within the IT network, right? So I can shoot out a print request, right? So sitting from here, and I can shoot out a request from New York, right? So the printer in New York may print that content, right? So that's the level of relationship that you establish, and using the networking devices, and by identifying those printers that you have on different locations, you can identify and you can shoot commands as and when required. This section here is to identify the different printers that you have in different areas within your IT enterprise. Then we also talk about communication devices, the desk phones that you have within your offices, the Cisco phones, the IP phones that you have on your desk, right? Now you also maintain records of those Cisco phones or IP phones within your IT enterprise, within your configuration management database, and you keep information like what is the number of the Cisco phone that is assigned to Sam, what phone is assigned to Rahul, what phone is assigned to Shweta, Abhi, or Vikrant, right? So you have that relationship established, right? And why that is important is, let's say for 20,000 employees that is there in your organization, you have 20,000 phones, right? Right? And those 20,000 phones, you don't know which phone is associated to which person, which employee, right? So for that, you have to create that relationship into your configuration management database. You identify that Extension number 3336 is associated to Sam. Extension number 3335 is associated to Rahul, and likewise, and so on and so forth, right? So if somebody has to pull up a directory of all the extensions available in the available in your organization, right? Uh, you may somehow pull out that information from your CMDB because your CMDB is capable of having all those information, right? You may also like to have a different information or database of all those assets, all those communication devices, but then you can use your CMDB as well to get that kind of information, right? Now you also maintain the list of accessories that you are using within your organization. For example, uh, the earpieces, the headphones that you are using, the mouse that you are using, the keyboard that you are using, that may be part of the computers that you have here, but additionally that may also be a part of the accessories identified here, right? So that's why we have a need to have that information within our CMD. Right? Now, the next one talks about the computer peripherals, right? So, like the computer devices that you have within the IT enterprise that can be available here as well. Then we talk about software, right? When we talk about software, we maintain an inventory of all the softwares within the organization, right? Because different project teams working for different customers may have different software requirements, and they may have different software development environment, right? One could be working in Microsoft application development environment where they will need the .NET framework and stuff like that. Another one can work on the Java development environment and they will need JDKs and Java LCK and JRE, Java runtime environment and all, right? So for that, you must have a listing of all the software identified within the organization. This list of softwares and reports built on all these IT assets will be very useful for decision makers. For example, directors of your business unit, vice presidents of your business unit, right? Um, Senior vice presidents, executive vice presidents, or CIO, CTO, right? So there are different views created within your organization. You may create different views for your CIOs or CTOs on this, and then that could be presented to your CIOs and CTOs. And believe me, CIOs and CTOs keep track of all these reports that you pull out for them, right? And they'll keep track of what is the health of the CMDB that you have within your organization, which area is working fine, which area is not working fine. If some area is not working fine, then that CIO or CTO will ask their vice presidents or directors to work on and find out what is the reason behind the assets not functioning properly, etc. Right? So by just looking at one piece of report that you have there, you can involve or engage the right set of people to look into what is happening with that IT asset and why that is not functioning, right? So that's why CMDB is very important, right? You will have a single system of record for all of the IT assets that you have within your enterprise, right? Let's also see some of more information about CMDB on Wiki. See, to understand the relationship, the thing that we just talked about, the stuff that we wrote here on the notepad, you may look at this diagram and you will see that this diagram says the same thing that we talked about just now, right? At one end, it's the configuration item, the smallest entity in the configuration management database. And this configuration item has been related to different stuff. Look at the hardware. And this hardware has some IP addresses, it has IP devices, IP network, IP phone, etc. that we just talked about, fiber channel port, the group, the database catalog, etc. All sorts of relationship you will find it here, right? I might have missed some relationship, but you can refer to this diagram and understand how your IT infrastructure is set up, right? Let's go back to. Let me know if you have questions, please. Sam, am I making sense? I think you have fair fair amount of idea about CMDB. You have been working in this environment.
Yeah, I'm got it.
Yeah. Right. And then this diagram talks about populating the CMDB, right? How do you populate the CMDB? So a very efficient way of populating the CMDB or information about the IT assets is using the discovery probe, right? Discovery is a feature available in ServiceNow that you can use to pull out information about different assets within the enterprise and then build your CMDB, right? For example, see this discovery program, which is being using you are building the CMDB using the discovery program, which is hosted on the Mid server app within your LAN, and this Mid server app is capable of pulling out information from all these hardwares or networking devices or the assets that you have within the enterprise, right? Uh, this is this 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 discovery we can't do it because we don't have access to that environment. So we'll be spending some time to talk about this discovery theoretically. Uh, Theoretically, how we can do that, but really we don't have environment to do this practically. So to build this CMDB, you can use discovery. The approach that we used to build our CMDB when we migrated our legacy BMC Remedy application to ServiceNow was to lift and shift the data that we had in our existing CMDB, right? The existing CMDB that we had was known as Systems Management Database, where we already had defined all those relationships, all those hardware and software. So we only had to shift the records that were available in the SMDB, the Systems Management database into our configuration management database, right? So using import sets and all, what we did is we wrote different kinds of PL SQL scripts to identify all those data that we need to have into our configuration management, and then we ported the data from the existing database environment to our configuration management database in ServiceNow, right? And the reason we did so because we already had those identified relationships within our enterprise, right? Now, in your case, it may or may not be that it may not be a case where you have already identified the uh, relationships within some sort of database. If not, then you may use this discovery to get that kind of relationships, etc. Right? Let's look into the configuration management application here. When you type in configuration management configuration, you will see the configuration application. You can go to CI class manager. Let's begin with CMDB dashboard first. When you go to CMDB dashboard, you will see a report of so mine does not have any report of that kind, but then you can have information about these kind of things, right? See, this is giving you overall report about the configuration management, configuration items, etc. Then you will have report on completeness of the configuration item, compliances and correctness. I don't have data here, so that doesn't make any sense. Then you have reports like top 10 incident generators, right? You may see here, this is a kind of report that is created within ServiceNow, and this report reads, what are the configuration items on which the maximum number of incidents are created? Remember, when we were creating different incidents during our courses, during different discussions, we used to choose this any IBM server, and that's why it has qualified in this report, and it is showing that number of incidents generated on this server is 3. right? And hence this server becomes the top, the top contributor to the incident generator, right? Now, if this report is seen by your IT director somehow, if he sees that this any IBM server is generating has generated three incidents, he may like to probe into and see what is the reason that this server is generating, this configuration item is generating these number of incidents, right? Because that's concerning. If one of your configuration items is generating a lot of incidents, you must fix that thing, right? You must find out the root cause of the incident that is getting generated. Why is that the server that you have here is generating so much of incidents, right? So you engage a particular set of people to work on that, and that gets resolved. So you have information of that kind here on the CMDB dashboard. These are the properties. I'll quickly jump onto the application servers. If we hit all application servers, it will show me the list of all the application servers that we have here. If you go to Tomcat, it will show just the Tomcat application servers that we have within the database. WebLogic will show only the WebLogic servers. In this case, we do not have any WebLogic server identified in the system, so we don't have it here. But what if we want to create a new WebLogic server, right? So we hit this WebLogic server and we put the information, some ID. So I'm naming it as some WebLogic server. Category is resource. Version is Word.0. Right? Managed by is some person. We talked about it, right? You must associate some person who is managing the server or hardware, right? So the
Yeah.
group of person that manages this server will be there. In this case, managed by is an individual who is managing a server, but then you can have support group as well. I can have a software support group or something. For example, let's pick some group here. I'll go and put software group here, right? And then you may also have information about the ports, the TCP port, for example. Let's say you are using 80 port and 443 port on this server, right? So you will have that information that will give you an idea of what are the ports being utilized on this server, right? So now you identified a WebLogic server within your configuration management that is coming up here, and it says that the category is a resource, right? You can have different categories as well, like app server, etc. Version number is one this. Now you can hit on this one and you'll see some related links here, right? And that could be subscribed by. For example, this server is managed by Rahul, but then there could be different persons who subscribe on this server. For example, there are other persons. You may be the primary support contact for this server, right? But let's assume that these are the persons who are the secondary support persons or the backups of Rahul that you have here, right? So if there is a case when I go on vacation, Rahul goes on vacation, then the persons who have subscribed for this web server or this server, WebLogic server, may be keeping track of what else is going on this server, right? So that kind of information is also stored within the server listing that you have here, right? So you now identify a list of people who will be interested onto this server, and then they will keep track of all the activities going on this server, and if need be, they can take some actions as well, right? To subscribe, you can hit button here, and it will add you to the subscription list, right? Right. So any event, any email going out related to this server, you will get emails as well, right? You may define emails if it is not defined already. But if something happens on this server, you will get emails that will identify that this is what is happening on the server, right? So that's the information that we have. Let's go back to all the application servers and let's look into this one. See the See, since we just created that WebLogic server, which is a standalone server, we don't see any relationship right now. So on the diagram, it shows an individual self-contained entity right now because there is no relationship that we have established. There is no task that has been created to this server for this server, so we do not have any task list. There is no affected CI for this server, so we do not have a list of affected CIs here, right? But if you go into and if you identify the affected CIs and you relate that affected CI with the server, then you have a relationship established with the server as well, right? And that will be stored here. There is no outage information that we have created. Outage is something uh, when your in production system goes down and people are unable to access that system, that is known as outage, right? Now the outage can be of two types. It can be a planned outage, it can be unplanned outage. Planned outage Planned outages are okay, but unplanned outages are undesirable, right? So the people who are on support or the group who is supporting that server or hardware or application must ensure that there are less planned outages, right? And if there are less unplanned outages, and if there are unplanned outages, they must discover the root cause of the unplanned outage and then fix that actually, right? The idea is not to repeat the unplanned outages that has happened to to that server or application, right? So that kind of information is also stored there. Now, the other record that I have opened right now is Dev Oracle 16100 having version 509. Now I see that this Tomcat version is dependent on this database, which is MySQL instance, right? So within the related items, I have relationship established here. Now, if I open this dependency map here, like the other one, the WebLogic server that we created, we had a individual item there, a single item having no relationships because we didn't establish a relationship of that WebLogic server to any other entity, right? But unlike that, we have some relationship established here, and it shows that this Tomcat server is depending on the MySQL instances here and the Linux server, because this Tomcat server may be installed on this Linux server, right? And then this MySQL instance may be related to this, right? Then this Linux server may in turn be having a different type of relationships with this, right? This Linux server may have these disks, meaning the storage relationship. So this Linux server has disk 1, disk 2, and disk 3, and then this Linux server is associated to this network adapter as well, Ethernet, right? So all this kind of relationship is established, and you can see and find out this information using the relationship diagram or the dependency views that you have here, right? So this one, for this Tomcat server that we have identified within the application server listing, we can see that this Tomcat server is dependent on the MySQL instance, and the MySQL instance will be dependent on the Linux server. This MySQL instance is running on the Linux server, right? And this Linux server has this type of relationship. To get greater details, you have this diagram, and that's it. So that was for application server. If we go to servers, let's take an example. If I go to servers listing and I hit all, I'll get a list of all the servers available within my IT enterprise. Right now, this report says to me that there are 44 servers identified within my system, within my IT enterprise. Now, look at the properties or columns identified in the server table, right? It talks about the name, company, asset tag. Asset tags is also very important, right? Every asset that you identify within the asset management cycle should be uniquely identified using the asset tag, right? So that asset tag should be there. Then you have information about the manufacturer of the hardware or software hardware that you have. In this case, the manufacturer is Dell, right? So you have the list of manufacturer. This manufacturer is coming from the manufacturer table where you identify all those manufacturers from whom you buy resources, from whom you buy software or hardware, right? You can browse through the list of manufacturers already identified, and within the company's listing you will have list of all those companies with whom you deal with, right? Any of these companies can supply you those configuration items or hardware, etc., right? Then, since you have identified that server, you have identified your manufacturer, you will also identify the server that you bought is of a particular model, right? So that model ID information will also be stored here, right? You may have the product serial number. If you have product serial number, you will store that serial number here as well, right? Why this is important? Because let's assume that this server, this Dell server that you have installed within your data center, after installation, after 2 months, there is some problem in the server. Let's say the RAID devices that you have here, the hardware or disk is failing, right? Then you have to raise a ticket to the Dell company to get that issue fixed, right? Because this server might be under warranty, right? This table or some other table will also store information about the warranty of the product, right? So your system, your CMDB should give you an information about the warranty of the product, and if it is covered under warranty, you will raise a ticket to the Dell, to the manufacturer, which is Dell in this case, and then using the serial number and the model IDs and the asset tags and the manufacturer information and the asset information, you will raise an incident in their environment, into their help desk, and get that issue resolved, right? So for that, you must have recorded all this information when you identify those hardwares within your system, right? Other information about the configuration of the server that you store are the OS domain, the operating system, the OS version, the service pack, the DNS domain the server falls into, the disk space available on the server. You may ask, why is the disk space important, right? So you may say that, let's assume when you identify this server, you have 1 gig of space available on the server, right? But then you you speculate that on a daily basis, I'm going to add 20 MB. I'm going to consume 20 MB of the disk space on the server, right? With that, you may like to put a script in place and calculate when should I expect that the disk space on the server be full, right? And if the disk space on the server is full, what should I be doing? Should I be adding more disk spaces on the server, or should I be doing something else, right? So you have to take decisions based on these information. So for that, you have to have configuration information like this, where you have disk spaces. You may also have information about RAM, the CPU manufacturer, the CPU type, the CPU speed, CPU count, CPU core counts, etc. Right? So this way, you have information about the quality of the product that you have introduced within your IT enterprise. And let's say you identify the date of decommissioning for this software as, from 3 years from now. But 3 years from now, you go ahead and before decommissioning this software, you go ahead and review the configuration of the server, and you find out that if I add 2 more GBs of RAM on this server will be operational for another 2 years, right? So basis that information, you may take a decision, and then you may upgrade the server to make it workable, to make it reusable, to make it reusable, right? So instead of decommissioning this, you are saving the cost of decommissioning and identifying a new server or within your project budget. And now what you are doing is you are cutting cost and you are utilizing the same hardware, right? You may go ahead and add additional warranty to this by buying warranty from different manufacturers, right? At that point of time, and you can get warranty for another 2 years, right? So that's how you can do that. So, so these kind of information will be there within the server, right? There are other information like, subscribe, Show discovery events will be related to discovery. This is not going to run right now. Even if I hit this one, it is not going to find out any information for me because the discovery is not configured. But if you do that, if you have discovery configured, that discovery will pull out information from that server, different information related to that server, and that can be used here within your configuration management system. Now, you have relationship about clusters. Clusters means a group of things, right? So you have a group of clusters, you have a group of Windows server, or you have a group of Linux server within your cluster. You may identify your cluster. And why is cluster important, right? Let's say one of your nodes goes down, right? So if you have a cluster created, if one node goes down, the other nodes can fall back. The other nodes can work as a waterfall. They can take the burden of the node that went down, and they can start serving almost in real time the request that was sent for that node which went down, right? So for that you will have clusters in place, right? So you have to identify clusters as well. Right now in this instance, the only cluster identified is the Windows cluster, and there is no data, right? But if you want to identify, yeah, we have one cluster. It doesn't look like a Windows cluster. It's a different cluster. It looks like a database cluster that we have here, having three nodes: node 1, node 2, node 3, right? Within cluster resources, we don't have anything. If you go into node 1, it will take you to the database instance where it is showing that this is a nice Oracle rack cluster that you are having, right? So information of that sort will also be stored within your database, right? There are different other entities that we have to talk about. See the list of assets here. We talked about up till cluster, but then you have database servers, database instances, catalogs, networks, and all these assets that we need to talk about. I think we'll be talking about these things tomorrow. For now, this is what I want to do. Let me know if you have questions.